the Church of Christ. It is, of course, based on the connectional theme from 2023's conference, Awakening Prophetic Urgency and Agency, Reviving the Church of Christ. It has been a timely theme for us as a Methodist people, for it reminds us that there is no time to be wasted. It is a timely theme that reminds us that we are to wake up, get up, and get on with the work of God. In a world that has grown weary and worn and tired and disinterested. A world which continues to suffer around us. A world which cries out and hears only the silence very often of a church who is missing the sound of the most vulnerable. It is a call to prophetic urgency and agency, to speak forth God's word in a time such as this. In her address at the 2023 conference, the presiding bishop gave us a scathing, I want to say a scathing, reminder of what the Church of God looks like. Signs of death, signs of an inward-looking church, signs of the failure of the church to take its call seriously as the people of God, as the people who live out the kingdom of God. And so she invited us, again reminded us, it's not new, we've always known, reminded us we are called to be a prophetic church, awakening urgency and agency. It's a reminder that you and I are the agency. It is not those of us who wear these fancy collars and these fancy dresses. It's not our work. It is our work. We are the agents of Jesus Christ in the world. It is a call to reawaken. And you understand, this is not to pick up from death, but to reawaken that which has become lifeless. Revival is also not something that is out. Revival is the work of God's Spirit. All we do is give our cooperation and allow that Spirit to breathe on us and through us. For we meet in a time of great upheaval, social upheaval, political upheaval on a global scale, on a local scale, even right here where we meet in the confines of the false basin. Areas that are crime-ridden, areas that cry out in poverty. In our own country, we know that unemployment stands officially at a figure of about 33%. I want us to understand, out of every 100 people, it tells us about 33 are without jobs. But that percentage increases amongst young people in particular. You know it. It stands at between 40 to 45% of young people, many of whom are highly educated, and yet do not find employment. It is a global pandemic we face with our ecological environmental crisis, which has changed the whole face of the world. We know that in the Western Cape. We've experienced storms and tragedy, devastation like never before. And the saddest thing is we are told we can't reverse this. Young people, you have inherited a world where the climate devastation cannot be reversed. We can only slow it down. And I trust that this is the kind of call you will pick up as a Wesley guild, as you come to make a difference in the world. Will you become the climate warriors, reminding us as a church, as a people of God, to care for the vulnerable earth? For without the earth, where are we going to live? We live in a context here in the Western Cape, particularly of gangsterism, gender-based violence, In the time that the Wesley Guild has been together, since last evening until today, almost 24 hours, statistically a woman is raped every 35 seconds. It's twice in every minute, more or less. How many women have been raped in these 24 hours, statistically speaking? Grinding poverty. You and I know we go by basics. And I know as young people, for you, basics is Coca-Cola and chips, and we're talking about basics, bread and milk. And so many of our people are going without because that basic bread product is unaffordable. It is a time of great trauma and loss, increasing mental illness, and the increase of suicide, particularly amongst young people, is growing exponentially. And that's, we only get to hear those who are successful. What about those who try and yet aren't able to succeed? You know it. Look next to your friend, might look joyous as we sing these beautiful hymns, but inside maybe struggling and wrestling with depression or other forms of mental illness because we tend to hide it away. We are willing to speak to each other and we say, oh, I have cancer, or I have high blood pressure, or I have asthma, but I'm scared to tell somebody I suffer from depression, or I suffer from all these other things, anxiety. I get those things over you. And so I ask you in a time like this, what kind of ministry and call will the Wesley Guild fulfill? We live in a world where integrity is not regarded very highly. Anything goes, as long as you don't get caught. And so we turn a blind eye to corruption. We turn a blind eye to the things that we ourselves and our friends get up to. A world of social media frenzy, where you know your social media status carries more weight than your bank balance. When we got nothing in the bank, what do? You put it on, hey, I have no money in the bank. But if you aren't without your social media, and we know we place value, the more likes you get, the more popular they are, the more bolstered we feel. And if you should be cut, or if you should be hacked, or if somebody puts something there that doesn't like, we break each other down. This is the world in which we live and minister. There's nothing wrong with core AI and technology, but the problem with it is what it's taking away from us. We use it responsibly. It can be used for beautiful things. The sadness within the Church of God, we are not faring very much better. There is lack of accountability, integrity, and commitment. We are events-driven church, low on discipleship, high on conflict, very high on conflict. Reconciliation is not something we seek for. Diversity is sometimes a stranger to us. And so we struggle with these things. There are signs of fatigue and failure in many areas of our life as a church. And you know, the world around us looks at us, longing to see Christ. Do they see Christ in us or not? And so in this conference, which no doubt will take you into next year's theme, we have been invited as agents of reviving the Church of Christ to become an alternative community. A community that doesn't reflect the world, but reflects the goodness of Christ. It reflects the community of Christ, the kingdom of Christ. A community called to be the light of the world, from Matthew's Gospel. The invitation to reawaken urgency and agency is a reminder we are all part of this. This call doesn't belong to the few chosen. Remember, Christ has no one to fulfill his mandate did one of those courses. And I remember CPR is a lot of hard work. If somebody is drowned and you rescue that person, it takes a lot of work to be able to, on the right place, to be able to massage, to bring life and to breathe life back in. You literally have to force breath into those lungs. And when the breath comes and they cough out all the debris, you feel good, but you yourself are exhausted. It takes hard work. It takes discipline. It takes courage. And that is what it takes for us. If we are going to be breathing life, reawakening, if we are going to be reviving the church, it takes hard work. It takes courage. It takes commitment. And so I want to say to you, sir, particularly with your incoming committee, it takes courageous leadership in a time like this, in a movement like this, to be able to awaken each one of us to our prophetic call. It takes particular behavior. It takes a particular commitment. It takes discipline. And so I ask myself, does the Wesley Girl Guild have enough commitment? Does it have enough courage? Is it going to stir within it a love for Christ so that the love of Christ can be shared with the world? You see, these are the tasks that are placed upon you, sir, with your committee. You are not just here to lead an organization to its own glory, that we can add a number of blue to our ranks. And it looks good on our photos when we fill halls. But are you going to build an organization that is fully committed to Christ? Breathing in the life of Christ, and through this organization to breathe life into the world around us. I want to suggest to you that the example of young Timothy may be something that you may want to hold on to as a committee, and that you might want to hold on to as young people. We read just an extract from the letter to Timothy, 2 letters written from Paul. I want to encourage you, Wesley Guilders, go and read Timothy. Go and read his story. Go and read the encouragement that is given to him. We first hear of young Timothy in Acts chapter 16, where we are told that Paul, on his second missionary journey, goes to Derbe and Lystra, and there they find a young disciple called Timothy, a young man, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer and a father who was a Greek Gentile. He was well spoken of. And so Paul sees this young person and takes him to be his own son, his companion in the Lord. He takes him on his journey and teaches him. By the time he writes the letters to young Timothy, Timothy is left in Ephesus, which was one of the strongest churches, a young minister. We are told he was a timid young man. There was nothing other than he had others trusted in him, but a young man, timid, frequently ill. In other words, an unlikely candidate. He wasn't the one who was standing up at the popular one. He was the small but faithful one. Tradition has it that at the age of 80, he became, when he's written, he's a minister in the life of that church. We're told he becomes the first bishop, as we hear it in Scripture, the first one who has this title, carries the title of bishop, up to the age of 80, when he leads a protest against the faith practices around him, and so a mob stones him to death at the age of 80, so the tradition goes. But one who started as a young man in faith. I want to say to you young people, do not think this youthfulness of yours is something that you need to look and say, I'm not ready for it. As a young person, God can call you to. He's calling you as well. At our conference, we heard that there is to be a harvest of young people for ministry. Because how is it God only seems to call people over 40 and over 50? How is it? I know I was 16 years old when I first heard that call. I wasn't sure what it was. And by the way, I was a Wesley healer. Before we had uniforms, I've told you the story that I wore my faith. We were not uniform, but at 16 in my confirmation year, I sensed something more. And at 18, I became a local preacher. And yet I kept hearing God saying something more. And then at the time there were 4 or 5 woman ministers around. So it wasn't something we were doing. And yet it persisted. I want to say to you, young people, you are called. If you feel God's call on your heart, offer for ministry. Come to the school of vocation. Don't think as an 18 or 20-year-old you have nothing to offer. God is calling you this way. And so this young man, Timothy, is encouraged throughout the letters. But this little extract we have, 1 Timothy chapter 4. I want to suggest just 3 things. It begins with Paul saying to Timothy, you need to point out these things to those that you lead. Imagine this young man leading a congregation. Remember, train yourself in godliness. Physical training is good, says Paul, but godliness, that's what you've got to seek for. He is described as a servant of Christ, trained in the words of faith, the good doctrine that he is taught. Train yourself in godliness. I want to say to you as the president, train our young people, the Wesley Guild, in the way of godliness. We don't seem to want to strive. When you ask, what is your life goal? I want to make money. I want to be famous. I want to become, the main senior partner. I want to become maybe the president of the country. Hey, I want to become the next pop star. How many of us say, what I want to do is to be a godly woman or man of God? We don't seem to strive towards that. It's as though we think, oh, loser. You're not a loser when you seek after God alone. And so I want to encourage you, call the Wesley Guild back to a godly way of life. And that takes discipline, it takes training, it takes perseverance. It is not something that just happens. It takes a commitment to this way of life. Physical training is of some value, he said, but godliness has value for all things. You see, when we walk in the way of God, we can offer that godly way to others. Secondly, he speaks about don't let others look down on your youthfulness. Now, we often use that as a passage to say to the church, don't ignore the young people. But in this instance, he is not condemning others. He is calling Timothy, a young person. Don't let others look down on you. Live the life that you are called to. Set an example to others. You see that he turns it around. It's not about what he mustn't be, but what he must be. And he says, look at this. You need to set the believers an example of what it means to be a follower of Christ. In what way? In your speech, conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Oh, that's a word we don't like very much. In purity, pure lifestyle. Set an example in your speech. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's hard to hold your tongue. And nowadays we don't just speak to each other. In fact, we hardly speak to each other. Where we really speak is on this. And we don't need to speak aloud. If I had access to your social media status, and I do watch some of Those that I'm friends with. What would I find? What are you putting on your Facebook and your X and all these accounts that my children say, I don't even understand? What are you saying? Be an example in your speech. Does your speech testify that you are a disciple of Christ? Or are you simply a critic of the church and of everybody in the world? An example in your conduct. In other words, your behavior must be able to tell us about who you serve. At work, at university, institution of learning, in your home, on the sport field, what kind of an example are you about? Do people see Christ in us? Or do they say, look, that one wears blue on a Sunday, but on a Monday, wow. We belong to the I'm talking to myself because when I take this off, who am I under? Remember, I'm speaking to me as much as I speak to us. In love. Oh my goodness, we are called to live a life of love, not a life of hate, not a life of conflict. We are called to live a life of love. Why? Because we follow the one who loved us so much, he gave himself for us. I want to say to you, everyone else, you need this committed in love, in grace, not in discipline, not in hardship, but in love. Make it a place where there is loving communication, a commitment to work with the one who loves us, in faith. Remember, he has said you have a living hope, a faith that carries you through. It is not a faith in, let's cross our thumbs, let's cross our fingers and hope for the best. That's not faith. Faith is an understanding, a commitment, a trust in God even when things go wrong. It is a perseverance that says, even though, remember the words of Habakkuk, even though I don't see anything, there's no fruit hanging on the vines, even then, I choose. I can see God at work. Faith says, even when it's hard and we are struggling, faith holds on to hope in Jesus. And most of all, in purity. Another word we may say in integrity. Young people, I think that's the thing that is missing so much in our world. Integrity, which speaks to truthfulness. Integrity says the person you see is the person that hides behind. When you're all by yourself in your little space in your home, when you look in the mirror, what looks back at you? You've said all the things, you've been singing beautifully, and people see that face. But integrity says, behind the scenes, when I'm talking to my boss, when I'm talking to my colleague, when I'm speaking to my friend, when I'm on social media, am I living with integrity? When nobody else sees me, when I'm busy with my business deals, integrity, purity says, I will do what Christ desires of me, and not the things that others say of me. And so the first one is focusing on Jesus. Second one, setting an example. And then thirdly, he reminds him, be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholeheartedly, that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life. Persevere in them. Because if you do, you will save yourself and others. Another version says, practice these things, immerse yourself, that you've got to get into it. It's not enough that we pick up our Bible in the morning, or as we have on our cell phone, one verse, 5 minutes, off we go. Or if you've got a break maybe and you say, hey, quickly. To immerse yourself in something is literally to get in, to soak yourself in it. I bet you if I ask you, what was the score between Liverpool and Manchester United 6 months ago. All Pirates and Morocco Swallows. 2 years ago, half of you will tell me the story, especially between your team. We asked you what the rugby score was, you can tell us. If you ask about pop culture, or sing some of the songs that you can tell me, but I tell me a little bit more about the book of Isaiah. By the way, tell me about the book of Nahum. Tell me all about Numbers. Our favorite book, eh? If you've got insomnia, you can't sleep, you open the book of Numbers and you read, and him began this one, and all the rules that we don't know it. You see, do we soak ourselves in the Bible? How many of us even still carry Bibles around? We spend hours watching TV. We can binge watch all weekend. And we know all the characters. Issy Dingle and all our favorites. We know them, eh? I don't know what young people are watching. We know them. But if I say to you, tell me a little bit more of the book of Ezekiel. I know the first thing about Valley of the Dry Bones. What's the rest of the book all about? I don't know. You see, to soak ourselves means that we immerse ourselves. We study, we read. That is why we are trying to revive class meeting, and we can study the Word. I want to say to you, so when you meet with your committee, don't just talk business. Take 15 minutes and read a chapter. Study it together. At the Connection Executive, we are studying, every time we meet, we study 2 parts of the book of Acts under our presiding bishop, reminding us, immerse yourself. Don't be willing to just be with the surface stuff, the popular stuff. Immerse yourself. Because he says, then you will get to be known to us. And so I want to suggest to you, and I know I've been long, but I'm calling us back, young people, to the way of God. You have something amazing to offer this church. Look, if I want to look for something interesting, and even sometimes controversial, I just need to go on the be careful I say Wesley Guild Facebook page. And there's always an interesting debate. There's always an interesting comment. There's a willingness to explore. That's exciting. We need young people to help us push some of those boundaries. But I want to encourage you young people, don't do it because it's popular. Don't do it simply to stir up debate. Do these things because you are seeking Christ. Because you are seeking what it means to be a Christ follower in this world. Because you are seeking in the career path you've chosen to follow a kingdom way of life. We need people to study economics and come up with a different system to capitalism because it doesn't do us any favors. We need young people to be studying the environment. We need young people to be studying social justice, social work. Those careers that we don't always see, we need young people to be following the path in education, to teach us an indigenous education. We don't bring children up learning all about the colonial stuff. It doesn't work. We need young people who will be saying, but as an African, as a person who's grown up, this is our history and this is how we think. We need it. But to do that, you need to be committed to Christ. And so I want to invite you, so be courageous with your committee. Be diligent with your committee. Lead in the way of love. Lead in the way of Christ. Lead in the way of integrity and purity. That you might set as example. That we can look to the leaders in the Wesley Guild, maybe even to offer us leadership. Leadership in the life of our churches. This is nothing less than a call to be the light of the world. See what Matthew's gospel says to us. You are the light. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your and not glorify Yvette, not glorify Olosi, not glorify Michael, but they will glorify the Lord Jesus Christ. Please, though, this is not your agenda. We don't in 3 years want to praise you. We want to praise Christ. Your committee, I want to say to you, you're not here because of your own gifting. Not because of your own power. This is not about your glory. It's not, I want to say, even the glory of your ministry here. It is to the glory of God. And so when you complete your task, and we would be able to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Go in the favor of the Lord. And so that means you're not always going to be faithful in the eyes of those who deal with you. You're not always going to find favor when you make difficult decisions. But remember, you seek one thing, the glory of God. I want to encourage you to do that well. We look forward to your leadership and what you have to offer. I look forward to what this Wesley Guild will do even in the life of this district. As we lead together, I hope we are going to see amazing people. Young people on fire, reawakening the Church of Jesus Christ, because you are reawakened within yourself to the Spirit of God. May God bless this. Amen.